G'day, Ziggy here, and welcome to my podcast, Plan to Prosper. Welcome to part 2 of this episode with David Balestri. If you haven't listened to part 1, then go back and listen to it because that'll put a lot of context around this second part of the discussion. If you have been listening, well, enjoy and welcome aboard. So I want to change gears a bit.
Yep.
And what I want to do is talk about... we finished off talking there about culture.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about businesses that do good.
Right.
And that it's innate as us as human beings that we want to do good for others.
Yeah.
Right? It's in us because whenever there's for example, a charity that's trying to raise money, whenever we hear the stories, whether engaged or hearing others, there's something that tugs at us, right?
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people these days, you're talking about new generations that are coming through.
Yeah.
They want to get in business because there's some purpose that drives them.
Right.
And I think more than ever, people want to know what you stand for as opposed to just what you do.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm an accountant and financial planner, well, there's a heap of those.
Right.
Right. But what do I stand for?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And typically when you're talking about businesses doing good, there's the social responsibility aspect, there's the economic aspect, there's environmental sustainability,
Sure.
which they're all good and they're growing and large institutions are adopting them and other businesses are doing their part as well. But I want to focus on the workplace culture that you mentioned and ultimately talking about the purpose-driven business, if you like,
Sure.
and get down to some of the nitty-gritty around, well, what drives some of the CEOs and entrepreneurs that that you see. So in terms of the workplace culture, what are some of the things, from a leadership perspective, it does stem from the CEO, but tell me what you've seen in your experiences, both good and bad, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting about workplace culture. I was watching a show, Simon Sinek, the Ask Why guy.
Yes.
He says, so he was talking about workplace culture and he says, people matter. This was his point, people matter. And he said that a CEO took him to task and said, people matter, but so do profits. And if you don't have profits in a company, then you can't take care of the people, right? So valid point, right? And so Simon said, okay, so is it 49, 51%? Like what, how does it work? And the CEO says, oh yeah, it's probably 49, 51%. And he said, so is it 51% profits and 49% people? And the CEO said, yeah, I would say that would be probably, because he said you can't have 50-50 because otherwise when a decision comes to go, is it profit or people, you have to have which way do we lean? And so Simon says to the CEO, oh yeah, so you're saying it's 51% profits and 49% people. He says, yeah. He says, I think that makes our company successful. He said, if I asked your staff, right, which one should it be, 51% profits or 51% people, what do you think they'd say? He said, they'd say the opposite. And he said, so you're trying to bring a value that's across purposes to your company, right? So in this discussion around, we should have healthy workplace culture. This isn't to diminish the fact that says we still need to run profitable businesses. My premise is that if all you focus on is profits and you neglect the people, that's the wrong way round the mountain. The way to do it is focus on making sure you've got a healthy, dynamic workplace culture. And yes, you know what? Also focus on profits, and the profits will help themselves. My experience and the experience of my clients is that happens that way. I was just a month ago, I was with a client in the Czech Republic, and he owns his second largest agriculture business in the nation. And take me, I was going up elevators in these wheat silos and in these cow sheds. It was just a surreal.
Do you have your boots on? Have your farm boots on?
I didn't. I was the typical tourist that hadn't ever been in. It was -7 degrees.
You had your shiny shoes on.
I had my shiny
shoes
shoes on,
shoes.
and I'm walking on ice. And I thought, I think I'm going to break my neck here. And but I watched him. It was impressive. The whole setup was unbelievably impressive. I mean, the majority of the milk and the bread in that nation comes through this man's farms, right? He's got about 600 employees. And he's got 600 employees, and I watched him. We went through a couple of the different farms and offices, and I watched him walk slowly through the offices. Now, we had some stuff to do. We were going places, but I saw him and I noticed he wasn't just powering through those offices. Good morning, touching base, looking people in their eyes. And by the end of the day, I walked away and I went, I know, great operation, right? But I thought, I know the secret to this guy's success is that every employee that we interacted with today, and we probably would have gone through 30 employees, felt respected, seen, known. And we didn't spend like 30 minutes. I'm talking like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. Like it was just, and I thought, people will, on the books, you'll see the numbers, but there's something much more here. Because I know that not only is that a part of his world, that is part of the value system to all his executives. And so no one, it's not just human capital that you're walking past and that,
Yeah.
It was really impressive, Ziggy. And I've seen that, like I said, I saw it played out in a culture, respectfully, an Eastern European culture that can be sometimes culturally quite,
yes,
right, quite
clinical,
harsh. Not emotive,
Yep.
not soft. You know,
Yep.
it's tough. It's just -7 degrees. Everyone's freezing.
Maybe they do need a hug. Hey, a warm hug.
Yeah,
7
maybe.
degrees, no, -7 degrees. So I want to pick up, you mentioned Simon Sinek, and one of the things is for leaders, important leaders, is compassionate communication.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
he gives an example where he says that that if you've got, say, you're a leader and you manage, a team,
Yep.
and there's targets,
Right.
and so it comes to the, so you've had the team for a while and they've
Right.
been meeting their targets, but all of a sudden one quarter,
Yep.
one of the sales guys doesn't meet their targets.
Sure.
Now, he said, as a uncompassionate leader,
Yep.
you might go hard on that person and say,
Right.
you didn't meet your targets. If you don't meet the next target, then that's a second mark. And then the third one, you're out,
You're
and
out,
it's just,
right.
right?
It's tough.
He said, as opposed to the compassionate leader that brings them in.
Yeah.
Brings them in and says, hey, tell me, that's not like you.
Right.
Is there something that's going on, something
Yeah.
we can help with? Like two
Two totally
styles.
different approaches.
And you would have seen, you're talking about culture, but you would have seen some of this.
Oh, look, in the early days, I did have a stint as a sales rep.
Yeah.
And, so you got to make your targets. And so I'm a sales rep, and I've got this really insecure, this guy, it was respectful. It was short man syndrome, so he was compensating.
Yeah.
And I remember we had just a failure of a sales event, and he that afternoon there's 6 of us. He pulls us all up, and he's got 6 envelopes in his hands. Right, makes us stay back after work. Right, so it's after hours. We're thinking, oh, what's going on? I thought, well, maybe he wants to talk about. We all knew that it wasn't a great turnout, but we were trying our hardest, And he says, I got to make a decision, boys, before you guys go home today, which is, in each of these envelopes is your fired notice, basically. Right? I'm gonna. He says, I just need to figure out which one do I hand it to all of you, or this is he's trying to make this is his pep talk. Do I say to you, don't come back tomorrow? Here's your pay, get out. Or he says, you'll have to convince me over the next 30 minutes why I shouldn't hand you the envelope. And
Did anyone walk out?
Look, I was a young man.
Yeah.
I was a young man, and it was just a moment where I thought, oh, this is degrading. And there were circumstances that I couldn't walk.
Yep.
Now as an older guy, I regret it. It'd be a better story if I said I gave him the finger and walked out. But anyway, in the end, he sweated us for 25 minutes, and then the release valve. Then he tore up the envelopes. He says, oh, I'm just kidding. I just wanted you guys to feel the pressure of, the non-performance. And so, that's an extreme, right?
Extreme, yeah.
And you just go, think about that. Is there any chance that guy would get the best? I think most of us quit within the next 30, 60 days, right? There's no way you can't.
No.
I know that's an extreme example, but again, each of us as, when you're a business owner, whatever, you carry 2 buckets. I always say you carry a bucket of water and a bucket of petrol. And when you see a fire, sometimes a fire is a non-performance, and you can shout, you can pound the desk, you can do whatever. You're just taking the bucket of petrol, and you're just taking a fire, and you're just going to make an inferno, which is not good for the business. Or you can come another way and figure out what, like you said, what's going on. I haven't met many people that wake up and think, gee, I want to do a crap job today at work.
Yeah.
But nobody thinks, unless you're a psycho. Yeah. There's probably a couple of those.
A few of those around, eh?
But no one thinks that way. So you're right. I think leadership is figure out what's stopping that person doing their best. If they're working for your company, let's just presume that the hiring process was correct and there was some synergy there. That's why they got hired.
Yep.
So as a leader, your job isn't to then, bring the stick. It's to figure out what's getting in the way of this person's best performance. And it could be a personal thing, it could be a professional thing, whatever it is. But your job as a leader is to find the solution to that. Empathy and compassion will help you find that. That doesn't mean that you don't have to sometimes exit someone eventually, but by the time you get there, you've worked through, and the exit doesn't diminish that person. It actually, I always say that you promote people into the next season, right? Don't diminish them into something terrible. Promote them into the next season.
Yeah, love it, love it. Coming back to that workplace culture, when I set up or started 3P, just doing financial planning. So I'd come out of accounting and tax, moved into financial planning, and was setting up 3P. And I thought, well, what do I call it? I didn't want it to be Sigalopoulos, which is my Sigalopoulos and Associates. That's just going to be a bit hard.
Sigalopoulos.com.
Hello, welcome to Pandelis Sigalopoulos and Associates. How can we help you?
Even a Google search ain't going to help you.
No,
with
the
that.
Google search ain't going to help you. No. So I then ended up coming up with the name 3P, and that's how we have a passion for people to prosper.
Okay.
When I was putting the brand together and the logo, and I remember being asked the question, when people see your logo, what do you want them to feel? Right. And there were two things I wanted them to feel. I wanted them to feel that they could trust us, that they could trust 3P, but I also wanted them to feel as though it was warm and they could have fun with us, right? And that's our culture here. We're very trustworthy. We do a great job, better than most. Yeah. We like to think. But we have fun doing that as well. Yeah. And we sort of run that way with our clients as well. So when you're talking about that culture and that, have you gone to some business where you've just gone, hang on, that's the opposite to what your culture is, or they're not aligned, or they are aligned? Yeah.
I mean, I think there was a bit of a fad to go, well, you need a good company culture, and so these days you throw something into ChatGPT, come up with some logo or whatever that you paste on a wall, but anything that you come up with that you contradict with your consistency of behavior or your structures is going to do it's worse than not having it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're basically telling your staff and your clients that you're disintegrous. If it's like, hey, we care about people, and then everything about your process says that you don't. You know what I mean? Yep. Like everything about your process says you don't, or everything about the way that you structure your workplace, how things happen in the workplace. You have a closed door policy, not an open door policy, or whatever it is. People they don't need you to be perfect. They just need to make sure you're consistent. The BS barometer of staff and customers is huge. You could get away with not that you'd want to, but you could get away with a whole bunch of stuff before. But we live in an era in which a 14-year-old has more access to information and the understanding of the world than the President of the United States had in 1995. Wow. Think about that for a minute. Like and particularly, not just millennials, but I just think most people can smell the rat, and so I think culture is so important, a healthy culture, but it's got to be more than a token. One of the challenges I find is when I walk in and I go, your culture is a compliance thing. It's just a compliance thing. It's because you need to have some, and I can feel the compliance. Yes. And it's a shocker. At that point, it's like tear it down, like take it off your wall.
Yeah.
Apologize to everyone and say, hey, we need to go into a process. I was doing this special project for a real sports franchise in New South Wales, and who from the
Sydney Swans maybe?
no,
AFL?
not the
AFL?
Swans, no, but a different code. But in the news, they had talked a lot about, hey, we want to take care of our players. We believe in just going the extra mile for them. And so I got in there. I was involved in a project of really bringing undergird and value to these players, not so much on the field directly, like it wasn't the technicality of the game. It was about undergirding their emotional health, their familial health outside. The slogan was making these guys great men off the field, not just on the field. And when we got into it, what we found was that the franchise had said all the right things, but it was just compliance.
Yeah.
Because it was going to cost a little bit of time, a little bit of energy, and they weren't willing to do it. They were like, nah, we've got that box ticked, and it's like, yeah, okay. But in the end, and I never rejoice in this, but then I would see their players over the number of years after that getting in trouble. And I'm not saying we could have fixed all that, but maybe we could have helped one.
In the AFL, and for AFL, we've got a footy player here. And he's a good footy player, isn't he?
Okay.
He's a coach now. As the boys that produced produced the show.
Yep.
But it's well known in AFL circles that Geelong and Sydney have had a great culture for many years.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And they've probably, out of those two, they've probably been most successful in terms of
Right.
reaching premierships and doing all that sort of thing. Like
Yep.
it's just, and it drives, whether
Yeah.
it's a footy club or it just
Yeah.
drives the business,
Yeah.
propels it quicker than what it would otherwise go.
Yeah, we used to, in the industry, across all industries, they used to call this the soft skills. The soft skills. I think that's not great. No, it's not great to call it soft skills. Soft skills is easy to just flick away. It's not soft skills. What we're talking about with workplace culture, making sure that you create an environment in which your people can give you their best and you can give them your best. It's smart skills. It's smart skills. And it's smart because it's smart with regards to just as a human being to another human being. I always say if you've got a culture in which people come into your workplace or your business or even your stores, if clients, and they leave diminished, you're doing it wrong. That's scandalous that you shouldn't be in business, to be honest. I think at that point, just close up and do something else.
Close up and go.
Go get a job somewhere and learn how to be an actual human being.
Yeah.
But the ultimate is, of course, people that I would say if someone comes and works for you for 2 years, wouldn't it be a great compliment if and when they leave, that they leave better, stronger, better human being, like within the capacity of what we can do, but just leave a more rounded human being, helped. Not just skillful, yes, better skillful, but actually in themselves, more regulated, emotionally healthier. Like you go, well, Dave, is that my responsibility? It's our human responsibility with another human.
Yeah, I like it.
Right,
Yep.
and just because it's business doesn't mean you can park the humanness at the door because money's involved.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Going back to you mentioned 1995. Yeah, we're going to show our age here. So I had graduated as an accountant and was working in a practice.
Yep.
We used to look after all the accounting and tax work and monthly management reporting for Bob Jane Team Arts Australia-wide.
Yeah.
Right, it's a great gig. Really enjoyed it. And I used to look after all the South Australian clients. But I remember having a meeting with the CFO of Bob Jane Corporation at the time. So Bob Jane himself was CEO, and then we had the CFO. And so I had the meeting with the CFO, and we were emailing at that point. Internet had obviously been around, and emailing was generally just text.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was earlier, so it would have been 95, or would have been before that. Anyway, so after the discussion, he says, I'll email you the Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
And I went, he's going to email the Excel spreadsheet? He goes, yeah, I'll email it. I said, oh, okay. So I'm waiting there for the email. And, of course, the email comes in with this Excel spreadsheet. And I double-click on it. It's just like, woo, woo. Now, I'd worked on emails, on spreadsheets before.
Right.
And knew how big they were. And I'm going, how did that big thing get in there?
Oh, gee, you're
now,
showing
if
your
I,
age.
If I'm sure if my daughter's hearing this, she'd be going,
Dad,
that sounds so silly.
Prehistoric.
But I was just like, anyway, that was the 90s.
Yeah.
I still
remember them saying, I'll send you a fax.
Yeah. You remember the ad where they used to put the fax in Hong Kong and it used to come out in New York?
Oh, man.
You know, around about the same time. And I used to go, how? Yeah, easy. All right. Let's go into some pretty cool stuff that I really enjoy, which is purpose-driven work. Right. And CEOs and businesses that have a purpose to what they're doing. They stand for something.
Yeah.
They're wired in a way that they say, this is going to be my purpose and my contribution to people, to community, to humanity, right? So talk to us about that in the context of, connecting daily tasks to a larger mission, making sure, we spoke about workplace culture, making sure that your people are on board and they can see their contribution ultimately to the purpose. Because that's, like you said, you can make a heap of money and it's about profit, and there's no doubt about that. That's the actual definition of, business or an enterprise is to generate profit. But I think more and more we're talking more about purpose. So unpack that for us.
Well, I think again, there's this saying that says your life, a human life in the scheme of time is nothing but a breath. It's just a breath. Like we just, because we're human beings, we get caught up and we think the world revolves around us, because it does in our heads, but it doesn't in reality, right? And so, unfortunately, the brutal truth is within 60 years of your death, it's highly likely no one will remember you, right? Doesn't matter how much money you made, like some people, sure, there's other things that you can do for legacy.
No one's going to forget Trump.
Well, yes. Right.
For whatever reason.
Right. So there's some of those guys, for good and for bad, some of those guys that will be remembered. But ultimately, our lives, it really doesn't matter how much money we make. Like, we're all dead in a box at some point, right? Death and taxes. Speaking to an accountant, sometimes you try and get around the taxes, but there's no getting around death.
No getting around death.
So, so then that thought about, there was a survey that talked about interviewing people that were, at death's door, in the later years, and asking them what their regrets and what the things. And the funny thought about it was that in the top 10, I wish I'd made more money was just not part of that. And over a large group, and you've got to say, so is money important? Yes, it is. But wealth is more important than money, and money is an aspect of wealth. But true wealth is relational, is the ability to bring value, the ability to leave this earth to some degree in a smallest way, but in any way better than when you found it. And I think that business and enterprise can be a great vehicle for that. And I think that's one of the things that we are entrusted with. The Pope actually said something recently. He said, in the classic psalm, in Psalm 23, it says, he says, God promises to make our cup overflow. Right? He's talking about the blessing of God. And he said, most people get excited about that, but their response to that is usually go and get a bigger cup.
Yeah.
Right? And the Pope just said, before you go and get a bigger cup, maybe you could ask the question that says, what should I do with the overflow?
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so in the sense of, I think what is true humanity is to go, hey, I'm blessed, or there's some measure of blessing. Where is the give back? Where is that? Where am I actually helping? We all know that it is not great financial wisdom to consume everything that you earn on yourself, right? There's just something about, save 10%, sure. Invest 10%, sure. But there's got to be some aspect of the giving 10% or whatever it is, whatever that number is, in a way that is not going to directly benefit you. Right. And I think that that's more about, people say, oh, well, if you do that, you'll get more money. Well, like all of that. But I just think that's a part of helping you figure out what it is to be human, which is to help the stranger. We are our brother's keeper. There's some, like, I don't carry the burden of everyone, but my life has to speak of a generosity of spirit. I have, obviously in my world, I have many people that have many more zeros after their bank account than mine. But there are many of those people that I wouldn't trade a day because they may have the zeros, but they're not wealthy because they haven't learnt the secret of they consume everything, they contain everything. There's no give back. There's nothing outside of their own personal benefit that they bring value for. That's not just bad business. That's bad humanness.
Yeah.
It's bad. It'll eat you. It'll eat you up. Tony Robbins, he's very clear. He's the guru, right, of success, and he's like, never consume everything.
I think he talks about giving away 10%.
10%. Like, I've heard the training.
Yeah.
He's like, you got to do that. You've got to create margin. There's something about it connects you to the human race in a way that if you consume everything, you don't.
Yeah.
And again, it's good business, but it's actually good humanness. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about engaging the people that work with you as well, in terms of their contribution to it?
Yeah.
Is it as simple as, look, if the leader's doing it and sort of we follow it, we're all on this journey together? Because one of the things that even at a board level at 3P, we're talking about how do we get more engaged in this space, but how do we also engage our team to be directly involved?
Right.
And I've been talking to a few non-for-profits and charities, and they said even what it could look like was to get your team to come down there one afternoon and help out with packing something for the homeless. It could be so. It might not necessarily be financial, but it could be something. We talk about the practical aspect.
No. My wife works for a company that does that. They have an RDO once a month, and that RDO is given to them to engage in whatever community service. That's the only proviso. The proviso is that they give that day. They'll get paid by the company. They have others that are just for them, to do their own thing. But this one is actually a give back to the community, and so they can go Meals on Wheels or the Sally's or whatever they want to do. It just has to be a community group, and they show up there for 8 hours and
love it
and do the thing. And so that's amazing, right?
That is amazing.
That's amazing. So there's that. I think part of it is part of the give back is if you can't afford to do that, like train your staff, like train them, like even at a minimum to be great at the technical aspects of their job, but then there's other aspects of development that you could invest back in. That's part of the give back. Because
I heard someone say, I can't remember who it was, that spoke about my success. If my team is successful, then I'm successful automatically. There's that There's that link and connection. So if you're helping them and saying, okay, what are your goals and objectives? What do you want to do? What is your career path? And let me help you make that happen. Yeah. Well, that's going to help the company overall, the business overall.
If you've got a real clarity about the business, you can. It's important that you help people figure out their strengths. And how those strengths then can be aligned under the umbrella of the vision of the company. That becomes easier, I think, in certain industries. Respectfully, the fast food worker that's, the kitchen hand even though in that respect you can make it about excellence. Right, because all of a sudden excellence translates.
Yeah,
you can set it. I mean, we talk a lot with clients about the scoreboard of success, and I usually say don't make the scoreboard of your business success only about things that are all about the business that have no relation to the staff. Like it's what I mean. Yeah. Like even if it's well, what if it's a technical thing? It's like. You can make safety, right, a scoreboard that is just about the business, saving on insurance and compliance.
Yeah.
Or you can actually make it about the welfare of the people. right? Again, you just got to be integrous about it. In other words, if you're just ticking the box, it's going to be hard to sell that. You probably need a therapist.
Now, a good business owner,
Yep.
Regardless of what their philosophical or ideological
It's good. Got it out. Yep.
beliefs are, needs to have integrity, honesty, transparency, in their business dealings with their customers, but even say suppliers and other stakeholders. But there are people without any sort of core, let's call it faith beliefs, that do that.
Sure.
That do that. Yeah. But there's a lot more awareness these days about the connection between spirituality and wealth, and wealth in business, right? And then with spirituality, not necessarily talking about religion, but
connection to something or someone greater than you. Okay.
Yeah, there's connection and saying, okay, well, what? This is the reason why it drives me. Unpack that, because I know you're in that space, and you're passionate about that, and I love hearing about it. And I want to, I don't want to believe, I do believe that 3P as a business, has a purpose, and there is a belief and a faith that drives that. For the betterment of people. Unpack that for us.
When I began professionally coaching people 17 years ago, like it's been 17 years, and through the private consultancy, the seminars, all that, I conservatively would have coached maybe 4,000 people, and from all walks of life, from startups to billionaires, like with a B, and so the spectrum of it. But I always found that true success is usually three parts. It's there's an excellence, a technical excellence, a really knowing your craft. There's the aspect of that internal personal development, the confidence, the mindset stuff. And then there is this third component that is that spiritual, that aspect, whatever how you define that, the connection to that. And I found that the people that were flourishing, of those thousands of people, were working on those three pillars. Anyone that was working on, say, technical excellence and let's just say personal development, but personal development for the sake of personal development, could do well, but they weren't thriving. It wasn't top of the market. And funny enough, people that were doing, maybe they were spiritual in some respects, and maybe they had some personal development but weren't in excellence, they were doing well as well, but they weren't thriving. It's these three pillars, and you've just got to figure out, we're talking about this third pillar now in the sense of the spiritual component. Yeah. Sometimes that spiritual component, like it can be, it's so varied. I mean, it can be just that sense of coming into connection with creation, with humanity, like we were talking about before about the giving back, working at a soup kitchen, not trying to, this isn't about a penance thing, or this is just about the connecting of your humanity, right? The something within you that is greater than you. And so it could be that, right? That's the way, there's lots of different roads in on that journey, but you can't suppress or deny that aspect of you. My exposure to people is you can't suppress that and be flourishing. If you think about any of the champions, who you would say are killing it in life, even today, they have some version of an answer, a varied answer, of that spiritual part of them. It just is who we are.
Yeah. Well, it's so good. Well, what's yours? Tell me a bit about yours.
Yeah. Well, I'm a for me, spirituality is I'm a Christian, but it's interesting because I always go, well, I'm not your conventional Christian. Usually when people ask me, "Are you a Christian?" I'm like, what do you think a Christian is? You're
not going to judge me, are you?
Yeah, because I'm like, me? And they might go, well, I think a Christian is someone who's judgy or da-da-da-da-da, or, burns candles or whatever it is. And I'm just like, well, I'm not that.
Yeah.
I'm not that. But I just, I feel like I have this synergy. I do believe. I believe in. I believe that God is good, always good, nothing other than good, and irrespective of the seasons of my life, I just I know He can be trusted. It's my lived experience. It's my family's lived experience. It's the lived experience of a number of my clients. I'm not exclusively. I don't exclusively just mentor. I always think everybody's spiritual. Some people are in tune with that more than others, and some can bring language to that. But fundamentally, anybody that says I'm not spiritual is like, no, you are. You're probably not this thing or that thing or the thing that you thought was the box.
Yeah.
But spirituality is really just about being truly human.
Yeah.
Fully human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Fully human.
Yeah. And you mentioned you're dealing with different people who have a different connection to that. So for the ones that say may not have a deep connection, you having such a deep connection, how do you make that connection?
Well, again, I just believe in the inner brilliance of everyone, and I help people to connect to that. So I would give the language. I think it's the God spark.
Yep.
But for some people, it's like it's healthier to say inner brilliance, and it's interesting that once you get them to, there's a whole way of connecting to that, discovering that. I find that triggers their or enhances their spiritual journey, even if it's dwarfed or diminished. Most people, the spiritual journey is the awakening to the brilliance that's inside of them. And the challenge is that most people equate spirituality to trying to find the bad stuff. And it's the total opposite. Real spirituality is the opposite. It's not it doesn't start with the negative.
Yep. So how would you introduce that discussion to someone who say doesn't has never thought about their spirituality, has never connected with it, has probably would typically see it as religion potentially, labels. There's all different types. It's like, you're all the same. How would you introduce that part of it to a business owner?
I like that. There's a great discussion around values. A value is more than an emotion, and it's more than just a concept in your head. A value is a deep-seated energy that is in the deepest core of you that is the frame in which you decide what matters and what doesn't, right? And your sociologists believe that your top 5 values are so deep in you that you would rather die than violate them. Wow. Like you would rather die than violate them. And when you do violate them, if you violate them over a consistent period of time, your body begins to react in coping mechanisms, right? Many times you think it's about, whatever your thing is, it's the bottle or whatever it is, and it's not the bottle, it's this value that you violated because of pressure, because you're in an environment in which you feel powerless about. So I just find that we go through this whole exercise because your values are unique to you, unique to the fingerprint inside of you. And so I find that once the values, their values, particularly their top 5, become aware of them, and then we begin to go, what does it look like to align your life and your behavior to your core 5 values? It's like an awakening happens. It affects their lives, their relationships. It absolutely affects their businesses. It's interesting. It affects your money. Like right? Because it affects your relationship to everything. And people have good relationships and bad relationships to money, to people, to business, to, all of these things. And so by actually tapping in and helping them discover these values, the core of their makeup, stress in life is determined to the degree that you live in a manner that is away from your value set. if one of your values is truth, and yet you're in an environment in which you've got to bend the truth all the time, that is going to take a toll in you, whether it's a substance issue that becomes a coping mechanism or literally your body begins to react. So, there are some environments, I say to you, Ziggy, there are some environments that make people sick. Like working in a toxic environment, living a toxic life is going to make you sick.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it from psychologists. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about it as a clinical psychologist in that you violate these and eventually it's going to come out.
Yeah, I think there's a book that says the body keeps the score.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Wow, that's a good one. I feel as though we could talk on forever.
Yep.
But there's so much to unpack.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been going for a little while, and I've loved it because there's a lot of things that we've spoken, a lot of things that are going to benefit your CEO, your entrepreneur, your business owner.
Yep.
We spoke about before about a business that's growing.
Yes.
And this is a whole nother topic, but the entrepreneur's journey, if you were to chart it, is not like that.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a 3D. It's coming out that way. It's just
you've got to be twice as committed to your development than you are your businesses. And if you don't, you place yourself in ultimate vulnerability. Either the business will blow up, or you'll blow up, or both.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Or the worst thing you could do is have a whole bucket of money and be an insecure, I was going to say asshole, but I won't say that.
I love it.
We don't want more of those.
Oh, we don't want comments. Write it to david.balestri@gmail.com. Any complaints? Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Great being here.
You've flown down from Sydney, to do this.
Yeah.
That's why we've extended it. We want to honour that and honour your time.
Thanks, man.
I love you as a friend. I love you as a brother.
Thanks.
We've been talking about doing some of these talks to unpack that. I think there's a real need and a desire out there for business owners. But I want these episodes, however it gets chopped up, to benefit entrepreneurs and business owners.
Yeah.
So they prosper.
Yeah, they deserve it.
They deserve it. And so we want people to prosper in their personal lives, in their business. Get to that point where you actually are talking about, well, what's my purpose?
Yeah, that's it.
Because in the end, like you said, on your deathbed, if your grandchild comes along and says, Grandpa, Grandma, tell us what's the last of it. I'm not going to say I wish I made more money.
Made another $50. Yeah.
Not at all. So we want to get to that purpose part, and I think true wealth is incorporating that as well. So thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great.
Great.
And we will catch you next time.
Amen.
Love it.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed part 2 of the discussion with David Balestri. You can connect with him online. He's written 10 books. He's got a lot of resources that he's made available. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.